Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and this week, if everything goes to plan, the Frankenholer will be moving under its own steam. Yeah. All right, guys, welcome back. And if you were watching last week, you'll know that the Frankenholer, this is my 1954 Ford F600 truck that I have built onto a Toyota Coaster bus chassis. Last week, I started fitting the heater and painted the rest of the front end panels, which hopefully I can fit this week. If you missed it, I'll put a link up above so you can catch up. And like always, do all the things, like, subscribe, and comment. All that stuff helps out that crazy algorithm. Now, a couple of eagle-eyed viewers did notice that when I put the heater in, something I missed was it's actually going to be the highest point of the system. So filling the coolant system can be a bit of a drama. I can put a bleed valve up the top. Now, I do have my vacuum filler, which is what I will be using, which is a really effective way of filling coolant even into those difficult places. I needed it on the Rockster and things like that because it has engine and the pipes go down and then the radiators and a whole lot of things. It makes it very difficult to fill. So I will be using that, but I think I may also put a little bleeder valve up on the top coolant pipe. So just a couple of things on how the coolant flows in an engine, which is something I wasn't really fully aware of until much more recently when I started really playing around with it. You're always thinking of the fact that heat rises. So with a radiator, the hot always goes in the top and the cold always comes out the bottom. Same with the heater core. So with the heater core, you'd want to put the hot into the top and the cold out the bottom. There were a few people who were concerned about my plumbing of the turbo getting hot coolant from the engine. I am not in the least concerned about that. People were thinking that you need to put the cooler coolant into the turbo. The fact is that the turbine housing of the turbo can reach up to like 1,000 degrees Celsius. So whether you're putting hot, say 100 degree coolant into the turbo or cold 80 degree coolant in the turbo, it makes very little difference. Basically, you're just trying to keep that turbo much cooler than that. 100 degrees is still quite cool for what the turbo is going through. So yeah, it's totally fine running it that way. And at least that is my understanding of how the coolant in the turbo works. I have just pulled out my heater core that I installed last week, and I realized that I did make a bit of an error. So the issue I've created myself is this. So here is my fan the way I mounted it last week. I can't really mount it any further into the middle of the truck, but the outlet is on this side facing sort of inside where the glove box is. The trouble is that if I want to get any pipe work from here, I am limited with space and I have to make it duct all the way over the top and go all the way over to the other side to get heat to the driver's floor, etc. So what I'm going to do is I think I've got just enough space to flip this around and have the fan sitting in here behind the glove box between the fuse box and it'll sit on this side. There'll be plenty of space then for outlets to come out the other side up to the dash fence and also across to the driver's feet. So let's flip this around the other way. So thankfully, as I'm only flipping the heater 180 degrees, I don't have to re-drill the large heater pipe holes and just have to re-drill the mounting bolt holes. That's relatively straightforward. And then I just block up the old holes with some rubber bushings. Then it's on to the very, very slow and laborious task of connecting up all the heater hose lines. You can see here where I cut off the old return line with my multi-tool. Then it's just a short connection between the turbo outlet and the return. I put some Raceworks heat shielding over the feed line that goes behind the hot side of the turbo, and that is my heater lines mostly done. All right, well, I have the heater mostly plumbed, not entirely plumbed, but most of the way there. So basically what I've got is I've got the two heater hoses. I have teed them together down here and they both go into the heater core out of the heater core and through to the turbo, into the turbo, out of the turbo, and back into the water pump. Last week I mentioned how that was problematic, because once I put a heater valve on this and it stops the coolant going into the heater, it also would stop the coolant going into the turbo. One of you guys actually gave me a fantastic suggestion about something I didn't know about, which was a 3-way heater valve. So basically, if you imagine these 2 hoses here going in and out of the heater, it's got 4 inlets and outlets in this 3-way heater valve. So I'd sort of cut them there and put the valve in here. When you turn the valve one way, it lets the coolant go through the heater and come back out. When you turn it the other way, it just makes the coolant loop back on itself and avoids the heater completely. So that's exactly what I need, and I didn't know it existed, so thank you very much. When that comes, I will fit that, but for now the heat core will be running all the time. So that'll work for getting the truck running for now. So over this side, you can see I plumbed it in. I have feed line going to the turbo, which has got some heat shielding on it. And now I need to do a bit more heat shielding by wrapping my exhaust and also putting on a Raceworks turbo blanket.
So a tip for exhaust heat wrapping is to wet it first. I believe that gets a nicer, tighter fit. So that's what I've done, and then it's underneath the truck to start trying to wrap it around the dump pipe coming off the back of the turbo. I hold that into place with a stainless steel zip tie, and then it is onto fitting the turbo blanket, which is difficult with a couple of springs, but I ended up using a cable tie on the end of the spring, and that made it much easier to get it into place and clip it on.
All right, we have the Raceworks heat shield, and I have heat wrapped the exhaust, so hopefully my feet won't get too warm down in there. So next thing I need to do is, last week I installed the brake master cylinder and did all the brake lines down to here, so on the inside of the cab. So now I need to connect up the brakes and clutch to that. So I have brakes and a clutch.
So I still have all of the old brake lines that I pulled off of the Coaster bus, and what I'm doing here is going through and straightening them all out, and then using the Raceworks brake line roller to get rid of all the little kinks, etc., so that they're nice and straight, so I can then start rebending them to fit them exactly where I need them in the new orientation in the truck. And here it starts a lot of backwards and forwards of fitting and bending and fitting and bending and trying to get them to sit nice and neatly up underneath the truck. It's quite tedious, but reasonably rewarding when you can sort of make it all nice and neat again, because basically that's what I'm looking for, is a reasonably neat, simple system that I can troubleshoot easily. And you can see I'm using my small hand tube bender, which is really the perfect tool for doing this sort of thing to get a nice, neat finish.
All right, that was a whole heap of work, but I have all my brake lines in, and they are all mounted up. So I have brakes and clutch. So now we need to get up the top and put some fluid in it, see if they'll bleed and see if I've got any leaks.
So I top up the reservoir with some Penrite DOT4 brake fluid, which is probably overkill for this old truck, but it's the good stuff and that's what I'm going to use. And then I start with the furthest wheel away from the master cylinders, and I'm using my vacuum brake bleeder on these. And you can see here I'm using a bit of grease around the nipple, which, to be honest, a lot of people suggest that it still doesn't work that great, but basically it's difficult to see when the bubbles stop using a vacuum bleeder, because often it sucks air from around the outside of the nipple. But I work my way around the truck and I get it done.
Well, I have a nice firm brake pedal. That was super easy, but I'm having a real pig of a time trying to bleed the clutch. Basically, I'm opening up the sleigh cylinder and setting up the vacuum to it, and I'm getting nothing. What I think the issue is that my reservoir is basically at the same height of where the master cylinder is. Like the feed line sort of goes up and down and potentially is just not getting enough flow. There's not enough vacuum from the vacuum bleeder to actually suck the brake fluid in, and I've got a bubble in the line. Now I do have this, which is a pressure bleeder. So this is a really good thing if you have the fitting that can fit on top of the reservoir. And basically you pump up and this pressurizes fluid all the way through the system. Well, that works really well. In that case, the problem I'm having is that I don't actually have any cap that I can fit on top of this reservoir to create a seal. But I do have a radiator pressure cap, and I'm hoping I can actually use this. So basically this is connected to a little pump, and this cap fits the reservoir. So I'm going to attach this, open up the slave cylinder, and then see if I can pump the pressure into the reservoir and force the fluid through. Let's see if that works. Dribbling out the side. That is not working.
So that doesn't create a seal, so it's back to the old drawing board. I'd actually try jacking the truck up here to get more of a head height on the reservoir, and even use a bit of a plastic bag to try and create a better seal.
All right, well, something's not right. There's obviously a blockage or something in that line, because there is no brake fluid going through. With vacuum, with tilting the cab up, I can't seem to get any pressure into this system. So there's something that's not right. So let's delve a bit deeper. I'm going to have to disconnect it and see if I can blow through the lines and make sure that there's actually like a flow going all the way through. But yeah, something's not right.
So troubleshooting time. I disconnect the brake line here and blow air through in both directions to see if there's a blockage. No blockage at the bottom. And no blockage at the top. So we are not really making a lot of progress. I also disconnect things from the inside and use the air line from there, and none of the lines are blocked. Everything is free flowing.
All right, so I set up another reservoir up high with my pressure bleeder, and for some reason, even with this fitting disconnected, the fluid is not getting through the master cylinder at all. But when I disconnect this, if I take this off and stick an air line straight into the end of the master cylinder, it does blow straight through. So it's open, or at least it is potentially open, but I am not getting, oh, hang on. Oh, looks like I did get a little bit of fluid through. So let's persist and see what we can get, see if we can get this moving.
Unfortunately, I think that was just a little bit of false hope there, and it is not going to bleed no matter what I do. It is really, really driving me crazy.
I'd like to say that I've never had this much of an issue bleeding brakes or a clutch, but that would be a lie, because I always have problems bleeding. I hate it, because it never runs smoothly. The brakes in this instance, smooth, beautiful. The clutch, driving me crazy. I've spent, I think, 5 or 6 hours now trying to bleed that clutch, trying all sorts of different things. I have a high feed going in. There is nothing blocking the lines. I've blown air through all of the lines all the way through. I can't seem to bleed it through the master cylinder. The only option I really have is to bench bleed it, so take it completely out, submerge the whole thing in brake fluid and pump it until it's got no air left in it, and then reinstall it. I've ordered a brand new clutch master cylinder. We'll see if that'll do the job, but I don't want to spend any more time on it now. I've had enough. Sometimes when you get really frustrated with something, it's better to just move on to something else. So that's what I'm going to do. All right, I'm going to move on to something that's a little bit more morale-inducing, and that is let's bolt back on the front end panels. Now I have most of the difficult plumbing, the bits that are hard to get into, sorted. I'm not going to get to be able to drive the truck today because I don't have a clutch, so that's out. So let's at least make it look a little bit better, and let's move towards making it look like a truck.
And that is a really good tip, is if you're getting frustrated with the job, sometimes you just need to step away, have a break, maybe sleep on it and come back to it fresh another day, and you can have a much better shot at working through it. So I moved on to the front guards here, and you can see on these inner guards they were interfering where my brake lines were, so they needed a little bit of persuasion with a hammer and a grinder, and I made them fit in there nicely. So with the inner guards modified and fitted, it's time to move on to the latch panel and then the front guards to finally fit them on, hopefully where they're going to stay. Then I move on to the lower valance and the headlight panel, although I know that is going to come off again because I've still got to get the headlights working and there's lots of little bits and pieces to do, but we're moving in the right direction.
All right, I had to modify the bottom of this front guard slightly to get everything bolted up, but we actually have at least the two front guards bolted up. It was very difficult to actually get them in. But I'm really loving the look of this engine bay. How good does all this bronze look? Now, obviously, I've got to come back and do something about aluminium bits. There's still more work to do, but the bronze I am very happy with. That was the perfect color. Now, the front guards are on and some of these bits are on, but there's still, I've still got to do the tilt for the bonnet. I've got to get that all sorted out. I have to bolt in the rest of the front end. This lower section is still only loosely bolted on while I sort of get everything there, and then aligning panels. There's still plenty to do, but yeah, I just spent so long this week making brake lines, making the clutch lines, and then struggling with that master cylinder, driving me mental. I'm really disappointed I didn't get to drive it this week. It should have been driving. I've actually got a tail shaft here to bolt in, and the clutch was definitely not the thing that I thought was going to be holding me back. I really thought it would be much simpler than that, but that's not the case. So in any case, I think it means it's time for fun facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hey guys, on a clear morning in 1955, two Ford Fairlanes crashed into each other just outside of Detroit. Both cars were badly damaged, but the occupants were uninjured, as these cars were early versions of crash test dummies. This was a staged event by Ford to showcase its new lifeguard design features. There are three standard safety features introduced in 1956. There was the deep center steering wheel. The door handles were now double gripped to prevent accidental ejection during an accident. And the rear view mirror was now a safety mirror to reduce broken glass. It also offered two optional features of front and rear lap-only safety belts and a padded sun visors and dashboard. The seatbelts were offered in a range of colours, and they were marketed as not only being for safety, but also to prevent you from sliding around the big bench seats during spirited driving.
All right, well, that was really frustrating. I tried forever. I really hoped I would be able to get the Frankenhauler driving under its own steam, but it just didn't happen this week. I've got a new clutch master cylinder ordered. I'm going to bench bleed it. I'm going to get it. It can't be that hard. Why is it that hard? I spent hours and hours and hours on it. Anyway, we'll get it running next week, and it'll actually be driving around, I hope.
I know, hopefully, for everybody. Okay, subscribe, like, and as always, like,
do the things.
Comments, all that stuff, and Patreon, help them out, day early, no ads. And yes.
We'll see you next
what
week.
the next week
and then
brings.
Hopefully next week it will be driving.
La.
See you guys.
Bye, guys. door handles, deep center steering wheel, and rear mirror, rear view mirror. It is a safety rear view mirror. Oh my God, what's wrong with me? Rear view mirror. And the rear view mirror was made of safety glass to prevent smithereens. Oh my, the double-handed door grips to prevent people from being...
What?
The double grip door handles.
Double-handed
Oh
door
God.
grips.
Okay. There are 3 standard safety features introduced in 1956. There was the deep-seated steering wheel. Oh God. The deep center. There were 3 standard safety features introduced in 1956. There was the deep standard. There are 3 safe... Yes, finished.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Everybody's saying the same thing. Yes.